Hello, welcome to Planet America. Coming to you from the Situation Room, I'm John Barron.
I'm Licciardello, and we have a situation.
The worst hiring slump since the pandemic.
President Trump furious over a disappointing jobs report, firing the Labor Department official who releases the data.
He was claiming that unemployment numbers and labor numbers were rigged.
I think our numbers were wrong.
Shooting the messenger, Trump lashes out after weaker than expected job numbers. We ask a former Labor Department chief economist about that.
And questions about Jeffrey Epstein are not going away. If anything, they're growing louder. But first...
It was another busy week for America's 47th president, as he so often does, combining business with pleasure and the presidency. On a private visit to Scotland, costing American taxpayers an estimated $10 million, Donald Trump opened his new golf course, Balmedie in Aberdeenshire, Scotland, adding to his portfolio of 15 other courses. In fact, according to Forbes magazine, since returning to the White House, Trump has spent 16 of his first 17 weekends at one of his golf clubs at a cost to taxpayers of at least $52 million.
Although, to be fair, I'm not sure that anyone, supporter or critic of Trump, would say that the problem with Trump is he doesn't do enough.
Good point. It was at Trump's other Scottish course, though, at Turnberry, that his caddy got caught on camera helping out his boss.
Keep your eye on his caddy. Oops, there it goes, right? Maybe drop that what to watch banner to see it, but there's a ball that goes rolling out of that dude's hand.
No-look pass.
Look at that.
What's supposed to happen?
Well, not that.
But try as he might to relax, those pesky reporters kept asking awkward questions.
Mr. Trump, can you escape the Jeffrey Epstein crisis?
Maybe that's why we heard this.
What's that song?
I don't know, it's very famous though.
It's from a musical.
Yeah.
Memories.
Music boomed out from the convoy of golf carts, drowning out the surrounding sound.
Memories indeed, but of what? Back inside, and there were more questions about Trump's friendship with the late Jeffrey Epstein.
I never had the privilege of going to his island, and I did turn it down, but a lot of people in Palm Beach were invited to his island. In one of my very good moments, I turned it down. I didn't want to go to his island.
But he's still not ruling out a pardon for Epstein's former partner in crime, convicted sex trafficker and abuser Ghislaine Maxwell, who's serving a 20-year sentence for her crimes.
Well, I'm allowed to give her a pardon, but nobody's approached me with it. Nobody's asked me about it. It's in the news about that aspect of it, but right now, it would be inappropriate to talk about it. So
The ask might be coming after sitting for 9 hours of interviews with Trump's Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche this week. Ghislaine Maxwell has suddenly been moved to a minimum security prison for women in Texas, Chaz.
Very strange, especially given literally 24 hours earlier, a Trump administration official said no leniency is being given or discussed. That's just false. But you know, John, there are a lot of mysteries about this topic, like what are they expecting to get from Maxwell? The DOJ have already said that they think the case should be closed with no further public disclosures, investigation or criminal charges. Add to that the fact that the last time Maxwell testified under oath, she lied. And most of the crimes they'd be interested in would now be outside the statute of limitations anyway. It makes this whole interview smell quite a lot. Especially pungent is that, according to Maxwell's lawyer, Todd Blanche came with a list of about 100 people to ask her about. I wonder who was on that list, John, and who was not on that list. Meanwhile, Trump has been getting himself into more strife on the whole Epstein issue with a whole new explanation for why he cut Jeffrey Epstein off.
other people would come and complain, this guy is taking people from the spa. I didn't know that. And then when I heard about it, I told him, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people, whether it was spa or not spa. I don't want him taking people.
So Trump was then asked who exactly Epstein had taken.
Did one of those stolen, persons, that include Virginia Nefri?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people, yeah. He stole her.
Well, that was of great interest to Virginia Roberts Giuffre's family, that Trump had said he was aware that she had been stolen from Mar-a-Lago. It made them wonder if Trump was also aware what Epstein and Maxwell had been doing with these girls, especially given this was in the year 2000, still 2 years before Trump said in an interview that his good friend Jeffrey likes women on the younger side. No doubt about it. Robert Jeffrey's family might have also been interested to hear that as far back as 2019, Trump's ex-assistant Sam Nunberg was saying that Trump had told him that he'd objected to Epstein recruiting young women from Mar-a-Lago to give Epstein massages. That's all sounding very consistent with Trump's story now about Robert Jeffrey. Nunberg quoted Trump as saying of Epstein, "He's a real creep. I banned him." But when asked what he meant by calling Epstein a creep, Trump did not answer that question. He just trashed the Reporters Network, NBC, and called them fake news and one of the worst. So draw your own conclusions there. Finally, the mystery of Epstein's death just intensified after CBS investigated the video of Epstein's special housing unit in prison from the night of his death. Turns out you can actually see Epstein at one point on the video, but since the staircase to his cell is almost entirely out of view from the camera, he's never seen actually ascending to his cell, which means there's no way to tell on the video when or even if he went to his cell. But it also means, of course, it's impossible to determine if someone might have entered his area without being recorded. And talking about the video, it's not raw footage, as claimed, because at one point there is a cursor and on-screen menu on this video, suggesting it's a screen recording rather than a direct export. And finally, while it claims to be 11 hours long, there's only 10 hours and 52 minutes of actual footage, John. So it seems like there's actually 8 minutes of missing footage somewhere. This story is just not going away.
No, it is not. Although President Trump did manage to conduct some affairs of state while he was in Scotland this week, hosting the British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer in a strange role reversal for the British Prime Minister being hosted in his own country. President Trump had also apparently seen some of the shocking images of malnutrition emerging this week from Gaza, breaking with Israel, who still denies famine is taking place. He announced plans to set up more food distribution centres.
We're going to be getting some good, strong food. We can save a lot of people. I mean, some of those kids that's real starvation stuff. I see it. And you can't fake that. So we're going to be even more involved.
But that, of course, comes after Trump himself scrapped the $40 billion US Agency for International Development, USAID, which had decades of experience safely delivering food and other aid around the world. Instead, a new US-Israeli outfit called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has been running a sometimes chaotic operation. According to the UN, at least 1,373 Palestinians have been killed while seeking food. Most of those killings, the UN says, committed by the Israeli military.
And just to be clear, Israel denies that those Palestinians were killed by Israeli soldiers, but some Israeli troops told Haaretz newspaper flat out that they were ordered to open fire on Palestinians with live ammunition as a means of crowd control when aid was being handed out. One commander in particular has attracted attention for telling his men there are no innocents in Gaza. Now, to the aid itself, I don't think the issue is so much US aid as the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA. They're the ones who used to hand out most of the aid in Gaza, but you know, Trump defunded them as well, and Netanyahu has banned them because he says they're working with Hamas. And look, it's true that 9 UNRWA staff members were sacked last year for potentially being involved in the October 7 attacks. Israel accused the UNRWA of allowing Hamas to steal the aid and sell it for profit.
Hamas has stolen the food, a huge amount. In fact, in 2024, the numbers are that Hamas profited over $500 million in stolen food aid that was supposed to go to these poor people who needed it. That's half of their budget.
But according to 2 senior Israeli military officials, the Israeli military never actually found proof that Hamas had systematically stolen aid from the UN. In fact, they told the New York Times that the UNRWA was largely effective in providing food to Gaza's population. Now, no one denies that a lot of UN food trucks do get waylaid. Between May and July, approximately 1,753 trucks failed to reach their destinations because they were overrun by peaceful, hungry people or armed groups. But I do think the real reason for starvation isn't the UNRWA or even in fact the new aid system. It's the blockade that Israel put up for over 2 months. Look at this graph of the number of tons of aid getting through to Gaza. It is pretty clear when the biggest issues occurred. And now if you look on the right there just isn't enough aid getting through, no matter what system you use. As you say, John, Trump is happy to acknowledge all this.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said there's no starvation in Gaza. Do you agree with that assessment?
I don't know. I mean, based on television, I would say not particularly, because those children look very hungry.
And in that respect, Trump is simply reflecting America. According to Gallup, America's approval of Israel's military action in Gaza is now at a record low of 32%, with disapproval reaching 60%. Only 25% of independents approve of Israel's action. And even some Republicans now, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, are flat out calling it genocide. She tweeted that October 7 was horrific, but so is the genocide, humanitarian crisis and starvation happening in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Democrats are getting closer and closer to cutting Israel off. Back in April, only 15 senators voted to disapprove of US weapons being shipped to Israel. But by last week, 27 senators voted to block a shipment of rifles to Israel. There is genuine movement happening in America, John, on this.
Yeah, so it seems. Now, we know that Donald Trump likes a deadline, especially when he can shuffle them around and keep everyone guessing. After giving Russia 50 days to end their war in Ukraine, this week he decided he'd hurry that along a bit.
I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today. There's no reason in waiting.
I'm not sure 10 or 12 days qualifies as a deadline, but still, Vladimir Putin, who continues to demand Ukrainian capitulation, says either way, he's happy to wait.
We can wait. If the Ukrainian leadership believes that now is not the time and that it is necessary to wait, then fine, we are ready to wait.
Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, who's now the deputy chair of the Russian Security Council, was sounding a little less sanguine, warning Trump that each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country. Never one to back down, Donald Trump replied,
I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate ranges just in case the foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that.
Then he added, without a hint of irony,
words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances.
All hope that. The other big deadline came on Friday, when the 90 days that Trump gave himself to reach trade and tariff deals with pretty much the entire world expired. In the end, he had some form of new trade agreement sketched out with 8 nations and the European Union. And he announced a tangle of tariff rates, including a 35% duty on many, but not all, goods from Canada, 50% for Brazil, 25% for India, 20% for Taiwan, 39% for Switzerland. The UK and Australia do keep the default base rate of 10%. China saw tariffs on their goods slashed from 145% to just 10% as well.
Yeah, although Trump's Russia deadline might influence that as well. If China keeps buying Russian oil, the US might charge them an extra 100% tariff as a secondary sanction, as Trump promised. Also, most of these rates, they don't come into effect until Thursday, so who knows what's going to be the case by then.
Yeah, watch this space. Still, this is all money, of course, which will be paid to the US government by US importers, with those costs likely to be passed on to US consumers, possibly reducing demand for imports, affecting exporters, maybe even boosting American manufacturing. But US business doesn't seem too confident about a surge in local production as a result. That is, if the latest jobs data is any guide.
In July, the U.S. added just 73,000 new jobs, below expectations, the unemployment rate of 4.2%.
Yeah, those figures were super unwelcome. Trump had only just started celebrating the second quarter GDP growing at an annual rate of 3%, way better than expected. And his team was seriously cocky.
You know, a lot of people, Maria, talk about Donald Trump for the Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm thinking that since he's basically taught the world trade economics, he might be up for the Nobel on economics.
Let him have it.
But then the next day, he got hit with a double whammy. First, the tariffs finally started affecting inflation, with consumer prices rising 0.3% from May to June, up 2.6% for the year. And core inflation, that's prices minus food and energy, also increasing 0.3% for the month, up 2.8% for the year. And that is all before the majority of new tariffs go into effect as well, I might add. Then secondly, these job numbers hit. Even manufacturing lost 11,000 jobs, and the whole point of Trump's tariffs is to bring manufacturing jobs back. That was the third month in a row that America has lost jobs in manufacturing. It is not working.
No, it seems not. The employment news got even worse from there, though, with a major revision of previously, it seemed, quite solid job numbers.
May and June's job numbers are roughly 258,000 less than previously reported.
Now, it's not that unusual for monthly jobs data to be later revised. Happens here as well. But the president was crying foul.
Today's job numbers were rigged in order to make the Republicans and me look bad.
OK, but what you going to do about it?
And some breaking news this afternoon. The White House now confirming that the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics has been fired.
Well, that's one way to address the problem of jobs numbers. A lot is going on this week, Chaz.
I get that Trump was upset. If you look at the Trump administration's performance creating jobs today, it has not been trending in a positive direction. Look at the red zone there. You can see Trump's feeling the heat. But the revisions are simply not blameworthy. Firstly, Trump's accusations of politicisation. Last August, when the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, revised previous month's jobs numbers down, Trump said it was evidence that the BLS had been trying to help Democrats. But now they're doing the same thing again, revising previous jobs figures down, and Trump's saying they're trying to hurt him. So that's a ridiculous double standard, especially since the final jobs report last year, only days before the election, was a disastrous result of only 12,000 jobs added. That hurt the Democrats. Secondly, to the accusations of incompetence, well, why such a big mistake? Well, actually, it's not such a big mistake. 258,000 jobs sounds like a lot to miss by, but the true numbers are that their original jobs estimate was 159,724,000 jobs, and their revised estimate was 159,466,000 jobs. It was just an error of 0.16%. Not very much when you put it in context. But also, the reason the figures were revised in the first place is because the BLS received additional information that wasn't available at the time of the first results. This happens a lot, and they definitely needed that information because one of the main causes of poor data is shifting population trends affecting the results. So Trump's immigration and deportation policies could be changing labour force numbers quite significantly. And even more of an issue, the response rate for the BLS's survey has fallen from around 60% to around 43%, which is really not good for a super accurate survey. Now, there was a group of experts called the Federal Economic Statistics Advisory Committee who are working to solve that issue of low response rates to BLS surveys, but that group was disbanded by the Secretary of Commerce in February. And by the way, John, they were unpaid. So sacking the group didn't even save a cent. It was just pointless vandalism. The bottom line, John, is that this sacking achieves nothing except to make people wonder whether the next strong jobs report they see is real or if Trump's cooking the books. Brilliant.
Yeah. The economic data is about as reliable as Trump's golf scores at the moment, I think. For more on all of this, we're joined by Betsey Stevenson. She was the Chief Labor Department economist under President Obama, now a Professor of Public Policy and Economics at the University of Michigan. Betsey, welcome back to Planet America. I wonder, are we in a position where we can say this is cause and effect, these softening jobs numbers and this spike up in inflation that we're seeing is a result of Trump's regime of tariffs?
Tariffs are definitely pushing prices up for American consumers, and they're also putting some downward pressure on employment. We've seen things like manufacturing layoffs because of the tariffs in the United States. So we know that there's some problems there. But I think it's also worth keeping in mind that the United States is going very hard after people who are, like, I should just say immigrants, but immigrants have been in the United States 20 years legally with permanent residency, are still under threat. And that is changing the employment situation. If you take an industry like leisure and hospitality, where we've got around 40% of the workers in that industry are immigrants, when you start cracking down on immigration, both legal and the undocumented immigration, you're going to see the employment in those industries decline. That's what you're purposely trying to do, is decline that employment.
Now, Betsy, you said you're expecting to see the effects of tariffs in July, August, September. When were you expecting to start seeing the effects of the immigration crackdown turning up in the data?
I think that one's so hard to measure that it's going to take all the way until the 2030 census before we get a really good set of metrics on what's happening in the United States. You know, there's a lot of different aspects. There's not just people being removed, people being scared to go to work or to engage. And then you also have the decision to come to the United States in the first place. I think this is what the current administration wanted to do. They wanted to create a lot of fear around coming to the United States to reduce people willingly do it. And I think that's going to work. The reason it's very different from the tariffs is the tariffs, people have taken actions to get ahead. So they said, oh, tariffs are coming, let's build up our inventories. So they're going to be able to take some time to spend down their inventories before they decide how much of these costs should we pass on to consumers. What are these costs really going to look like? Will the countries eventually adjust and absorb some of the tariffs like the president's saying? Those are all big unknowns for companies. And what you don't want to do is go out and, you know, if you're Procter & Gamble, which announced, 25% price increases coming this month, you didn't want to do that 3 months ago and then say, oh, just kidding, now we're going to have price cuts. As much as consumers tell you they like price cuts, they do not like price cuts as much as they hate price increases. So that's why prices only go typically in one direction, up, and companies are slow to do it.
So, Betsy, we've seen this week Donald Trump basically shoot the messenger when it comes to these jobs numbers. He's also waging this ongoing war with the Fed Reserve Chairman Jay Powell. He wants him to lower interest rates. What are the implications of this sort of politicisation of previously impartial members of the economic framework?
Well, first, can we just stop and laugh at the irony of the fact that he wants to fire Jay Powell for not lowering interest rates because President Trump says the economy is weak and needs lower interest rates. And then he fires the BLS commissioner because he says the economy is really strong and she reported data suggesting it might be weak. This is like firing your accountant because you don't like what they're telling you about your income. They don't have anything to do with generating your income. They just count it up for you and tell you what is going on in your balance sheet. So firing a nonpartisan, non-policymaker because you don't like the data they're reporting, that is a step farther than I ever thought we'd see this administration go.
Finally, how would we know if future jobs numbers are politicised? And if there are thousands of people involved in collecting those stats, then doesn't that protect the process from overt politicisation?
Here's what could happen. You could imagine that they start to change definitions in a way to try to make things more favorable for President Trump. And in a way that the general public is like, oh, I think that makes sense. So let's say, for example, they decide that they're only going to report employment data on native-born Americans. So you have to have been born in the United States to count in our employment statistics. There's a lot of people that would think, oh, that's a fair measure. But that would certainly hide a lot of what's happening with the immigration. You could also decide that we're going to count people employed who are doing things that are not for pay. Well, we think that stay-at-home moms who are looking after their families are doing work, so we're going to count them in the employed. We're redefining employment in a way that we're going to count more household production. But if you're purposely changing the definition in order to hide the fact that the economic situation's getting worse, then, I think that makes it problematic for people who are relying on accurate information to try to understand whether it's a good idea to be investing in the United States, as well as for people to see the data that tells them how the rest of their citizenry is going.
Professor Betsey Stevenson, thanks for joining us on Planet America.
Great to talk with you.
Now, we've heard a lot about America's deficit lately, but what we don't hear so much about is how they're going to pay it off. One solution could be to raise taxes, but as Melina Wicks explains, there's one group of people that no politician wants to tax.
The US has a huge deficit, so how are they going to deal with it? The left says tax the rich. The right says cut benefits to the poor. Sorry, I meant to say cut
fraud, waste, and abuse.
But there's one group that politicians on both sides of the aisle never want to get offside.
The middle class.
Well, the middle class folks.
Middle class families.
The American middle class.
The middle income people of our country.
Politicians don't want to balance the budget at the expense of the middle class. And that might be the problem. The US is a low-tax country. Their revenues as a percent of GDP are below the OECD average, and significantly below Scandinavian countries known for their generous social spending. But that's not because America doesn't tax the rich. It's because they take significantly less from their middle class. The average worker in America pays almost $12,000 less than an average European worker. Meanwhile, America's high-income, capital gains, corporate and inheritance tax rates are all above the OECD average. The US has a progressive tax system, and that's only increased over time, with the average federal income tax rate since 1980 rising slightly for the top 1% and falling for every other income group. So where does Europe get the money for all its social programs? Australian backpackers? Jeff Bezos' wedding? Charging people for saying champagne when they're really drinking sparkling wine? While every country's tax system is unique, there are two major differences that make the US an outlier. The first is that America is the only OECD nation without a value-added tax, or GST. That's a tax that hits the middle class more than the wealthy, and it accounts for 96% of the total tax revenue gap between America and the OECD average. There's also a huge difference between who cops high marginal income tax rates. In Sweden, the top rate of about 55% applies to earnings as low as $47,000. No wonder they all have to make their own furniture. If Americans wanted European levels of social spending, they would need European levels of taxes. But that's not a deal Americans want to make. It's not even a deal Bernie Sanders supporters want to make, with 2 in 3 saying they don't want to pay more than $1,000 for universal healthcare. Some didn't want to pay anything at all.
And I must tell you that I am disappointed.
Of course, none of that answers the question of how America is going to pay off its massive debt. But don't expect the middle class to be going Dutch, in any sense of the words, anytime soon.
For decades, one man has brought you up close to the natural world. Donald Trump.
How's my hair?
Bringing to life
Our beautiful plains, our beautiful land, our beautiful oceans. Nobody knows more about the environment than me. I know a lot.
in his latest documentary,
Whales. Big, magnificent whales.
Realizing his lifelong dream.
I want to be a whale psychiatrist.
Before it's too late.
The windmills are driving the whales crazy, obviously. Oh, the wind is rushing, the things are blowing, it's a vibration, and it makes noise. It drives the whales freaking crazy. They kill the whales. They remind him of Chris Christie.
Planet America presents.
Something happened out there. There's something driving the whales a little bit loco.
You know, I think I'd actually watch that. Thanks for joining us on Planet America at our new time of Monday nights. Unless, of course, you're watching on ABC iView, YouTube and Facebook, in which case, who on earth knows what day it is?
We're going to be back at the same time next week. Join us on ABC News on Friday night as well for the weekend edition. See you there.
Bye-bye.